Have you ever had something like this happen? You've got a certain route that you drive all the time, maybe to work or something, and you never noticed a specific kind of tree or maybe a billboard advertisement until someone pointed it out to you. And then not only do you see it along that route, but you start seeing it everywhere. Well, I had that happen with me in the Bible. The subject that is the focus of today's passage, I began to see several months ago just how prominent it is throughout the Bible and how foundational it is. Hey, welcome to Looking Intently. I put out 3 short videos each week, and right now I'm going through the book of James. To catch up on the past ones, click this tag there, and to keep up with the future ones, click the subscribe button and then that bell icon when it appears. So has this ever happened to you that you became aware of some topic in the Bible and now you just, as you're reading, you see it. It's there just all throughout the Bible. If so, I'd love to hear what that is, what your aha moment was with that. Well, I've had a few of those, but none are bigger than the subject that's in this passage today, humility. James chapter 1, verses 19 and following, he writes this. He says, "This you know, my beloved brethren, but everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. Therefore, putting aside all filthiness and all that remains of wickedness, in humility receive the word implanted, which is able to save your souls." Now, you might look at that and say, wait, that's hardly earth-shattering, is reference to humility there. And especially the fact that if you've ever heard this passage, taught on or preached on, or maybe just read it yourself, we usually emphasize the other things. We talk about how James is this, very practical book. And so we emphasize things like quick to hear and slow to speak and slow to anger. Isn't that practical? How much would that help us in our relationships? And, the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. All these other things. And maybe if we were to say, what's the most important, we'd probably talk about receiving the word implanted, which is able to save your souls. That's pretty major. But notice how that phrase, receive the word, is preceded by, in humility, receive the word implanted. I think that's the key, not only to that phrase, but really all of them. And the reason I say that, number one, is because humility means more than we maybe come to think it means. You ask people, what's it mean to be humble? And they'll usually say, well, you don't brag. You're not a big show-off. That is just scratching the surface. It is so superficial compared to what it is at its heart, certainly in the biblical sense of the word. When the Bible talks about humility, it means being aware of my limitations as a creature created by the Creator. Basically, it's saying God is God and I'm not. And okay, what are the implications of that? And the 2 big ones are, one, I have to surrender to Him. Again, He's the Creator. He created me. The only proper response is to surrender. And once again, He's the Creator. He created everything out of nothing. Whatever my level of power influence is, I've got to rely on Him ultimately, because there is nothing I can do that compares to Him. And so you think of humility that way. It's essential first for becoming a Christian. Why does a person become a Christian? Because they come to believe there is a God who created us. And so I need to surrender to Him. And we also realize that I've sinned against Him and I need to rely on Him for salvation, because there's nothing I can do on my own to earn it or work it out or anything like that. But also then, as I live this Christian life, everything that James says to do here, be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Why don't we do that? Because we think, we know best and I'm justified, right along with that anger of man. There is something the Bible talks about, righteous anger, righteous indignation, but anger of man means that's not it. It's me just getting angry and thinking I'm justified. And it really comes from a lack of humility. No, God's the one who's in control. God has said do this. If it's not violating Him specifically, it's not righteous anger, and I need to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. I need to put aside all filthiness and all that remains of wickedness. Those 2 key words, all versus, hey God, I've changed enough, I've done enough. This is what you get. And we may never say that, but if we don't work on everything, it's me saying, it's good enough, God. And then when it says, receive the word implanted, I need to humbly receive that. God, the only way I can grow and be who you want me to be is through your word. Be renewed through the transforming of your mind, it says in Romans. Well, once again, I realize this verse right there, that's not the most earth-shattering verse about humility. But you have to realize this is just one of many references. And there are some major ones. When Jesus is asked who's the greatest in the kingdom, humility is central to that answer. When Paul talks about what Jesus did to empty himself and come to earth, again, look and see the place humility has in that. And even when Jesus is asked what's the greatest command, it says, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. You know, in Mark's account, Jesus precedes love the Lord your God with the verse that does precede it. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And that's really laying this foundation of humility. I don't have time to go into all those in detail, but I tell you what, I'll put a link to each of those passages and a link to a sermon I've done on each if you want to see and have those explained further. You know, I said I've had several aha moments in the Bible where I just see something, but none is bigger than this, again, because this underlies the others. You hear me talk a lot about, you know, if we just trust God's two traits, that He's in control and He loves us, we can face anything. Well, humility underlies that. You hear me talk about how faith is to be our DNA as Christians. You know, not just I believe this, but I truly rely on God. I surrender to Him. You see how that fits in with humility. It is there. And I would ask you, you know, as we seek to apply this, where would you have placed humility on a list of Christian traits prior to this video? You know, all the different traits, things that we should have and do as Christians, where would being humble rank on that list, and where would it rank now? And especially when you realize it's not just I don't brag, but I'm aware of my limitations. God is God and I'm not. I surrender to Him. I rely on Him. How well do you do at being humble? What's something that you can do to ingrain that more? And I tell you, one key thing you can do is as you read the Bible, look for this. Not just the word, but that idea of what's being taught here, what's being explained in this passage of Scripture. It builds on being humble. You're going to see that, and you're going to see many more things as you read the good book like a good book.